I was getting death threats I should die. Like, I should die for having a quote that talks about so many people would have such a visceral reaction to something. If you read it and you're upset about it, I mean, you're the one going, hi, I'm the weak man you're talking about. That's why I'm so pissed off. So what is it about the weak man that really upsets you? Like, what is it that you feel in your heart? What is it that they're so upset about?
You're a man living in the modern world in a time when men and manhood are not what they once were. You live life on your own terms. You're self-sufficient. You think for yourself and you march to the beat of your own drum. When life knocks you down, you get back up because in your gut, you know that's what men do. You're a badass and a warrior. And on the days when you forget, we are here to remind you who you really are.
Welcome to Sovereign Man Podcast, where we aim to make men masculine again. I'm your man, Nikki Ballou, and we have a special guest for you today. He is professionally known as G. Michael Hopf, but to all his friends, he's Geoff Hopf. Welcome to the show, Geoff.
Nikki, how you doing? It's been a while since I've been on your show. It's good to see you again. You're looking good.
Thank you, brother. God bless. So, crazy time in the world right now, brother. Crazy time. And you're the author of a pretty famous poem that goes something like this: hard times create strong men create good times create weak men create hard times. And it talks about four turnings in the world, in current events that happen. And right now we are in what's called the fourth turning. And I'd love to get your take on all this.
I know you and I've talked about it before. That quote is become kind of like, I was saying to somebody yesterday, it's the quote that's launched 1,000 death threats now. But that's an interesting conversation we can have after I kind of dive into this. If people aren't familiar with the fourth turning, it references the Strauss-Howell generational theory, which posits that history kind of cycles and recycles over and over again. And they have that each turning or each cycle is around a generation, like 1 or 2 generation, the 25 years, so to speak. And we are currently sitting at the end cycle, which is called the fourth turning, or what's also known as the crisis. And I think if people objectively look into the world, they would say that, we seem to be in a state of crisis. And It's not just because there's just things happening geopolitically around the world, but just looking at our own nation states, whether it's Canada, whether it's United States. Specifically, when you look at North America, it's predominantly Canada and the United States, I think, has issues because you have two distinct cultures that are residing in these land masses, right?
Yep.
Two very, very distinct cultures now. I think when I'll just use the United States as an example, and why the fourth turning, we're probably in the midst of it, coming toward the inflection point, which is probably civil war or some kind of bloodletting or some kind of conflict, some kind of like kinetic, engagement. When you look at, say, the political parties in the United States, you have the Republicans, you have the Democrats. Well, it could be argued that for up until almost not that long ago, that both parties agreed that a free market capitalist economic system was the system to have. It was the superior system. They all believed in the rule of law. They all believed in a kind of constitutional republic. But where that's changed, and the change is primarily on the far left, is you've got the far left, which is now primarily communists, and they're Bolsheviks. They have this kind of authoritarian type of viewpoint. They do not believe in a capitalist system. They actually really don't even know. They talk about democracy. It's like the North Koreans talking about living in the People's Republic. Right? It's the same thing. That's when you see the progressives on the hard left talk about democracy. Well, it doesn't mean anything from a party that hasn't had democracy inside of their primary system for the last 3 cycles. They've essentially allowed the elites of the party to select the candidate that will run for president. That's not democracy. That's, a kind of a one party kind of a system that they like, which communists like. And so what the Democrat Party has been hijacked now, probably these far left progressives, they no longer believe in capitalism. They believe in communism or some kind of hard nationalist socialist state. And then you have everybody else. You still have the remaining Democrats that still believe in that. So you have they were two different paradigms, two exactly different cultures. And you can't have two cultures that are vying for power. Eventually they're going to clash. And we see those clashes happening now. I think you have those clashes happening in Canada. I think a lot of that was exposed during COVID. And I know when Justin was up there locking up farmers and the people, the trucker situation, and locking out people's, they're freezing their bank accounts and all the protests that was happening up there. It was horrific. It's horrific. And I think when you look at, I think it's the Liberal Party, right? Is that what's in Canada that's in charge?
Yeah.
I don't think they're the Liberal Party of 20 years ago. They're the way Justin clearly brought it harder to the left, more authoritarian, more kind of like a dictator in the way he was ruling. And I think even the last it didn't even have any elections until just recently, when I think they thought that Carney would win. So I think that these factions do not believe in democracy; they just believe in power. And once they get power, they do everything they can to maintain it. So here we are. We're stuck with two distinct cultures that are vying for power, vying for control, and eventually they're going to clash. And I think that that's coming soon. And when I mean soon, and then it could be in the next 5 years, all we would need is some kind of other major event that could be the tipping point to tip us into that kind of a conflict.
It's interesting because you may very well be right, but I'm just wondering if that does end up happening, how does the left think they're going to do? Because all the people that are strong, mentally strong, believe in the right to bear arms, and are believe in self-defense, do things like work out and make themselves strong. Well, they're not far left Nazis and crazies and Marxists. They're normal people. They're on the side of those that believe in the traditional America and free market capitalism. So I don't understand how the far left thinks they're going to win, because they're going to lose. They're going to lose badly.
I don't think it's going to be, if I were to write this as a story, because I'm a novelist, if I were to write this as a story, if they were smart, I don't think they've been playing very smart for a while. But if they were smart, they would wait for an opportunity where there's an event that occurs. Then they seize that event. Maybe it's a severe economic downturn, a severe economic downturn. Maybe it's even an economic collapse. And then from that collapse, they would have to be kind of rally around a charismatic leader that could promise to get the American people out of this, or the Canadians out of this. That's how I think they get in. Right now, they're on the other side of pretty much every issue. In the United States, the last election, the Democrats keep siding on the wrong issues all the time. Right now, they're going out of their way to defend MS-13 terrorists. You can't make this up. I don't even know what.
How the hell did Donald Trump manage to make these guys do that? Because it's unreal that they're siding with this dude who's an MS-13 terrorist and beats up his wife, and his kids are afraid of him.
I know this is kind of when you have people that are so dead set against you that you could literally have the cure for cancer and they would be upset saying cancer deserves to live. They can never give Trump an opportunity to ever be victorious. And so they will just go after anything, and they make up these wild and crazy situations. So right now they're not winning in the court of public opinion, in my belief. They're just not. And so I think it would have to be some kind of an event that touches everybody, And then if they played their cards right, they could seize power that way. And then once they've consolidated power, they would be very hard to dislodge. And I think you could possibly see some violence in the streets, some things along those lines. But for the most part, people just don't want to be involved in that situations. You would see the fringe elements clashing. But if they were going to try to do an all like a actual like armed resistance to kind of seize power, there's no way. You're right. They couldn't do it. They would not be successful. They would get squashed. They would get destroyed. So they'd have
power. They get into power, right? Let's just say they get into power, and then all of a sudden there's a whole bunch of right-thinking people, normal people, who say, "Screw this, we're not going to do this," and there's a civil war. I'm just trying to understand how the left thinks they're going to win that civil war, because the people that believe in what they believe tend to be, let's face it, not very martial, right? And all the people that believe in what you and I believe tend to be strong and martial.
Yeah, they would. They're again, if they were trying to be the quote unquote, they call themselves the resistance, and they're going to rise up and have a rebellion. They're never going to win that. That's never going to happen. They would need to have control over the government and then all the levers of government and power. And they would then, with their media allies and their propagandists, gaslight, mislead, deepfake their way into essentially making conservative-leaning people criminals, call them terrorists, use the weight and power of government to arrest them, seize them, confront them, use the military. And the issue is that the military and it can be lulled into, not everybody, most people would say, okay, I'm going to be doing this. So they're going to, a lot of people will kind of just line up to do that. Sometimes I've been critical of police officers because I was very upset. Like when I was watching what was happening in Canada with those truckers and this police just arresting them, I'm like, what are you guys doing? You should be on the side of the people here. How hard is this? Yet they were doing it. The police had no problem arresting people. So that's what concerns me. I think if they get into power, some of those would, just because of their own survival, like, oh my God, these people are in power, and I want to keep my job, I'll just go arrest these guys over here. I'll arrest those truckers. I'll arrest those protesters over here. I'll arrest those MAGA guys because I don't want to lose my job. I'm afraid. So I think people could be lulled into doing the whims of an evil regime because of a fear of reprisal. So a fourth turning can be very dynamic, world war, civil war, or it could just be a complete, utter change of the system itself. So we have this constitutional republic, and then through a series of economic downturn, which turns into kind of like an election. Now we have a complete upheaval of the system as we know it, where they're outlawing political parties. Maybe they're doing drastic measures. They're seizing control. That too, by the way, can be a fourth turning, because what you're doing is you get this crisis, and you have an event that completely changes everything. It's not the same. And there will be violence, but the system that we had going into the fourth turning is not the same one they have coming out of it.
I could see that. That's a possibility. I mean, at the moment, you've got Donald Trump in charge, and the MAGA movement is ascendant in the United States. Yeah. And conservatives are feeling their oats, as it were. Events can turn on a dime.
Yep.
What if China decides to seize Taiwan? What will Trump do if that happens?
That's a great question. I don't see a situation where China would want to do that. I don't see how China wins in that situation.
I agree with you. But what if they do? What will Trump do if China does that?
I think he'd have to be, forced to confront them. And then we'd be looking at a full-scale war, essentially,
We're looking at like a Cuban Missile Crisis on steroids, right?
Yeah. I know people talk about that as if it be at one. I don't think it's a cakewalk for the Chinese to take Taiwan. To be honest with you, I just don't think it's a cakewalk. I think there's a lot of talk about how large China's Navy is and its military and things like that. But let's just be realistic about the Chinese military. They're not tested. And the last time they were tested, I think, was some kind of incursion into Vietnam, and that was not successful for them at all. And you have they're just not battle tested. Their Navy is a joke. Yeah, they're building so many ships a day or whatever, or a month or whatever, but those ships are pieces of shit.
Yeah.
They don't build anything of quality. They had their single aircraft carrier. I don't think really works. So I don't. I'm not necessarily overly concerned
So
about
if they
their
attack Taiwan, you
military.
don't think it's going to work too well for them. The
I don't
Taiwanese
think so.
military is going to put up a stout resistance.
Yes, one, you're invading an island. That's not easy to do. You're having to have you're having to land. It's not going to be easy for them to do that. And I don't see how they get around not having the entire world turn against them at the same time, too. So then China isolates itself just to occupy an island. I don't see how. I do not see how that's a win scenario for Xi. I just don't see how that. Now, again, people can do crazier stuff, but I just don't see how he gets anything from that ultimately. I mean, he can
So
look at what's going on with Putin, and
how
Putin's
old
been isolated and marginalized. And what's that?
how old is she? Is he 70 something?
Probably, yeah. But he changed. He had the laws changed or whatever, and he's going to be in for a while. So
I know he did, and that's I'm just gonna look up on the internet. How old is she? Xi Jinping. When was this dude born? He's been the leader of China since 2012. He was born in 1953. As of now, he's
he's
71
yeah,
years old. He's going to be
yeah.
72. He's unlikely to be in power forever, but probably 10 to 15 years if his health holds up.
Yeah. Again, how does he then maintain power? Because if China then does that, and what if they're not successful? I mean,
They're
look
not
at Russia.
successful. I think
Russia's
if they're not
bogged down in
successful,
this kind of what's
if they're not successful, I don't see how he holds on to power.
yeah, I and
I,
it'd have to
I
be
see his
swift and
lieutenants
decisive.
turning against him. Yeah, I see his lieutenants turning against him if he's not successful.
Yeah, I look at what Putin. They're still sitting there slogging away. How many Russians have died, right? And I know
But does
there's.
Putin,
I
does
think.
Putin
I think.
care?
What's that?
Does Putin care about that?
I think Putin has done, I guess, from a propaganda standpoint, a good job in the country as far as because the world has turned against them. So because of that, he's got eh, with all the sanctions and things like that, he's gotten a lot of the Russian. I think he's gotten some sympathy from a lot of Russians because of that.
Yep.
And boy, the Russians are really good. The Russians, when it comes to people that know how to suffer, the Russians know how to suffer. They're really good at suffering. They've done it for a long time. But so do the Chinese. The Chinese are also a people that are resilient, and they've suffered a lot, in the past for a long time. Specifically, starting with Mao Zedong and all those things. But
Yeah, he was a bad dude.
would Putin be in power if he really didn't kind of control a lot of the levers? It wasn't authoritarian. It's hard to know. But they're just bogged down in Ukraine. They're not going anywhere. It's fascinating when you watch the invasion. You would think that they were just going to roll on in and control the entire, but then he doesn't. Like they don't know how to fight at night. We've seen the United States military power operating in the past 25 years, seeing how skilled it is with the technology and the devices and the weaponry and the skill sets. And then when you're seeing other nations go to war, you're like, wow, it's pretty early 20th, like mid 20th century fighting. Like they're not using a lot of tech. They're just not there. And I just really questioned the Chinese military's ability. And it's a big bet. Like, what does he get out of it? And great. So say if he takes Taiwan, what do you get? I don't see how he's victorious ultimately.
If he takes Taiwan and Trump's in power, I'm thinking Trump leads a worldwide
Coalition.
resistance and coalition to say, hey, boys, we are not buying anything from China. We're going to bring them to their knees until they disgorge Taiwan. And you also send in, operators and spies, OSS types, behind enemy lines to sabotage and harass and cause problems for them. So yeah, I see that that's problematic, but I also see, it could quickly escalate into an exchange, a bigger exchange, maybe even a nuclear exchange. That's nobody's idea of a good time.
No, and that would be horrible. Yeah.
Yeah. If Xi Jinping sends nuclear weapons toward the North American continent, that's problematic. But
yeah, it's on that. You're looking at a full scale nuclear exchange. That's exactly what you would have. Under Trump, you would have a complete full scale nuclear exchange. It would just not be pretty at all. It wouldn't be pretty.
No. Trump also has decided to throw the technological might of the United States behind Reagan's dream of Star Wars, right? And if he does that and he's got the ability to protect the homeland, the Chinese are screwed, because even if they have a full-scale nuclear exchange, he's probably going to be able to knock most of those missiles down, and they're not going to be able to do the same. That would
I mean, I've been wrong. I mean, I would never have guessed Putin was going to roll into Ukraine, but then he did. So, is Xi ready to go and take Taiwan? Again, I could be wrong, but I don't think I just don't see how. I don't think he will too. I don't see how. I just don't see how they benefit. Period. Even under like a Democratic president, I guess it would depend on a Democrat, but I just don't see how they end up not marginalized and separated. Plus, they've got other issues going on, by the way, in their country. When you got the tariff war going on, but you've got their demographic issue, which no one really wants to talk about. No one wants to talk about.
China's about to have its population go down by half in the next 30 to 40 years.
Yeah, and I think that's actually even going to be accelerated.
No nation has ever gone through that outside of wartime, and it will be fascinating to see what's going to happen.
Oh, it's economic problems. In fact, Bobby, the fertility issue and the depopulation issue is not just China. It's every Western industrialized nation is dealing with that. When you look at the
leftist politics, right? If you get rid of leftist politics and you encourage women to stay home and have babies, it's not really a problem. I mean, Viktor Orban in Hungary is giving baby bonuses and tax-free status to any family that has more than 4 kids. So if you're a Hungarian family and you have 4 or more children, you don't have to pay income tax.
Yeah, but what's interesting is that's moved the needle, but not enough to get to replacement rate.
Well, for Hungary, it's great, but Hungary's a tiny country. If they did that all over the Western world, I think that'd be pretty wild.
And maybe it would, but I think there's South Korea's been trying to do that and they've not done it. They've seen a very marginal increase, but South Korea is doomed. I mean, South Korea is past the point of, they say any country that's gone below 2.1 and the replacement rate never gets back. So that's frightful. And then you look at, say, a country like South Korea, which is, I think, the worst position than anybody, even worse than Japan. They're at 0.6, which means in a generation or two, let's just say this, in 100 years, they're not going to exist. They're just not going to be around. There was a guy, I'm forgetting his name right now, but his last name is Collins. And he and his wife are part of the pro-natalist movement. And he used to be a VC in South Korea. He's American. He went there, was working with the VC fund over in South Korea, and he was asked to do a study for investment in South Korea, and he was doing it. And he came back, and he's a young guy, so he wasn't really aware of any of this stuff. He goes, "Wait, I'm doing these projections out, for long-term growth, and there isn't any." And they're like, "What are you talking about?" Well, did you know that South Korea has a demographic issue? That means that there's not going to be an economy in about 30 years. It's going to collapse. And "Oh, yeah, we're aware of that. Just ignore that." How can you ignore it? Why would anyone want to invest in South Korea when South Korea is not going to have an economy in 30 years? It's going to be impossible. There's just not enough young people. And so South Korea's got that issue, and they've tried, they've paid money, they've done all these issues, they've moved the needle enough, but it's not enough. It's
I don't
where
know
they're
anything
sitting
about South
now.
Korea.
Oh, South Korea is in a horrible position. You should research it. They're the one leading the charge to the bottom, and they're in a position now. You could have every woman of childbearing age have 10 children, and they're still in trouble. They're doomed. And then you've got Japan, and then you've got China. China is like, I think China's population. There's some talk, because I follow some podcasts of people that are in China and they're able to make shows and they're talking about these issues, about people are disappearing, meaning like whole towns are being razed. So the Chinese government's coming in because the population is declining so quickly. And that's what happens. It kind of falls off a cliff. So it's kind of, imagine like the depopulation kind of bomb is where you hear about it, you know about it. It's like a tsunami that's off just past the horizon. You know it's coming, but you can't see it. It's still beautiful and sunny out. And then suddenly you see it like, oh, look at that. And then in an hour it's on top of you and you're gone. That's what happens with the depopulation bomb. It's like you feel it, you kind of see it, maybe see it, and all of a sudden it's like there, and it comes at you super quick, and everything is just over. And when they're talking about, when you mean like an economic collapse, most westernized nations will probably feel this in 50 or 60 years, is the fact there's not enough young people to do the labor. There's not enough young people to maintain the infrastructure, and to take care of the elderly, to take care of the jobs, the infrastructure, building, all of it. So there's just no people to take care of anything. The one saving grace for Canada and the United States has been immigration, believe it or not. It's been beneficial, but what's interesting is this: the immigrants that come in within one generation adopt the same fertility rate as the nationals do. So even if they're coming in from Nigeria or Afghanistan, they soon come around to having 1 or 2 kids and now no longer having 4 to 6.
That's because of the fact that our culture here has become feminized, and women are being encouraged to work rather than raise families. And the truth of the matter is that is a disaster for a nation. It's an absolute disaster for a nation. You need to have women having children and raising children. That is the backbone of the renewal of any society in any nation. And I know the feminazis are going to lose their shit when they hear me say this, but that's the truth. That's the truth. And Orban, what he's doing in Hungary is working because Hungarians are responding, and they're responding well. I don't know what's going on in China and Japan. I don't understand the cultural motifs there as well, but it appears that those cultures have turned into cultures where working is what's valued, and not family, and raising family the way that it was. And if you're working and you got a super small space to raise your family in, I can understand why they wouldn't want to have kids or would want to have just one child. It's not smart. It's not good, but it is what it is. And this depopulation bomb, as you put it, is going to destroy a ton of countries. And I think China is in big trouble. South Korea, Japan, absolutely in huge trouble. The countries that are doing well population-wise tend to be poorer countries, right?
Yeah, and specifically in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa. But even they're now starting to see that their fertility rate there is going down too slowly as they become more developed. There's like this link in with development and wealth and less babies. So essentially what happens, you have a democratization of allowing women to go to college and get educated, which is great. We should want our young daughters to be able to go get educated. They feel free. So once they feel liberated to do so, they then start to kind of take control. It's like, listen, I want to now have a career. I've just spent 4 years at university or 6 years at university. I now want to spend some time. Clearly, there's also a culturally, and you've kind of noted this. When you look at being a mother versus being a business professional, being a mother's been culturally put down upon. Pop culture wants to kind of demean being a mother. I agree.
Is the most important job in society by far and away. And honestly, Why would a woman want to go work for the man who just wants to work her butt off and doesn't care about her and will just take everything she's got to give, rather than be part of a family with a man who absolutely loves and adores her and her children? It just makes no sense to me. This whole feminist movement has destroyed the foundation of a strong and prosperous society. And I'm actually right now opposed to college for anybody, because college has become a woke indoctrination center. I've got my master's degree from Georgetown University. I was very proud to go to school there and achieve that level of academic success. But my oldest son decided not to go to college. He's working full time. He said, everything I was going to learn in school, I'm learning on the job. And I don't have to spend 4 years, drinking and partying to learn it. I can start working right away. And I got to tell you, unless you're going to become a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, or some type of profession where having that designation is needed for you to have that job, I don't think college today makes any sense anymore. Not traditional college, something like Peterson Academy, absolutely. And I signed up for Peterson Academy. I think that's great. But traditional college, heck no, not at all.
I agree with you completely. If there's something that needs to be reformed, it's higher education. Actually, all education needs to be reformed, but higher education absolutely needs to be reformed. But what it is, it's a big profit center. It's a big industry.
Yep.
And I saw with my daughters in elementary school where they were there in college day, right? And they're supposed to talk about what college they want to go to. Nowhere in there was talks about career day or trade day or military day. So because what they're doing is they're pushing colleges, because listen, it's a huge profit center. These colleges are sitting on billions and billions and billions of dollars of endowments, and they keep it because and then you look at the cost benefit of going to college to get a degree in something you'll go get a job in that can't pay off the student loan for 2 decades. It doesn't make any sense. Like it's becoming problematic. And the fact is we need to be honest with people, and we need to tell people, one, not everyone needs to go to college. And that should be started. We should be having that conversation with kids when they enter high school. I think high school should be restructured. I mean, I'd love to have some time to talk to you about my vision on what that would be. Yeah. But I would take high school, cut it in half, meaning you do your first 2 years, and then at that inflection point at sophomore year, you then decide, do you think you're going to go to a 4-year college, or do you think you want to go to a trade? Because then what the next 2 years are is those 2 years in college, which is, by the way, the first 2 years in college, you know this, you're getting your general education credits out of the way. It's just glorified high school. You're taking the exact same classes you took, but now you're paying a ton of money to do it. There's no need for that. That should be taken care of in the last 2 years of high school. If you're going to 4 year, you get the general education out of the way. And what's beautiful about it is that those credits are taken care of. And then the school system, meaning the state, pays for that, which why I'm a believer in the state paying for the education from kindergarten up to senior in high school. But then if you're deciding your sophomore year, if you want to go trade, that the next 2 years, your junior and senior year, are you taking your trade, going to a trade school in high school? So when you leave high school, you've already got your trade. You now go from there right into a job. You're already entering into a job, ready to go, trained, skilled. You can now be working toward becoming a tradesman. And instead of going out and then having to find that school, going and paying for it, it's taken care of. You already know it. So you literally graduate high school an electrician, a plumber, whatever that is. I think that it's so important. I think our kids are wasting so much time and resources. Like there's no reason why the first 2 years of college, they're not learning what they're going there for. Like if you're going to go because you want to learn film, which I don't understand anyway, why someone goes to a 4-year school, ends up doing 5 years to get a degree in film, when you can go to a great film school in Los Angeles, take it for a year to 2 years, and you got what you need to do film, right? Why do you need to go to Stanford to get a degree in film? Again, if you're going to be a doctor, if you're going to be a lawyer, if you're going to be an engineer, those things make sense. But there's so many degrees that don't make sense for kids to be getting. Those should be selected 2-year schools. They go there and they start learning right away from day one. They start learning whatever they're going to do for their career. Then they can graduate with that diploma, save money, and then go start their lives instead of being burdened with debt.
Amen. 100%. So let's switch gears. 1,000 death threats. What's that all about?
You and I have had the conversation about this. I remember we were talking about. I remember Stefan, and he did the book. And well, what's interesting is, like in 2020, past then, like the whole quote kind of became really part of the zeitgeist of what's going on. It'd been sitting out there. It'd been in my book for like 4 or 5 years before then, and so it hadn't really got much notice. And suddenly now, I think because of the election, somebody in the Republicans, somebody conservative, it just became kind of boom, this whole thing.
Yep.
What was interesting is post the election, like I was getting, I think it was 2021 or 22 after COVID, I started getting, because there are some groups that have used the quote, probably not the nicest groups that exist out there, but now somehow I'm supposed to be attached to those people, right? There was some kind of white power group or something that used it for some kind of propaganda for themselves on their site somewhere. And that's fine. I mean, it's fine because the quote is now out to the world for the world to use wherever they want, right? Yeah. And somehow someone from, I think it was Axios, reached out to me. And of course, the typical liberal kind of journalist with the gotcha question, like essentially framing it like, how do you feel, or what is your responsibility that a group like this is using, like essentially trying to tie me to this. Like, if I had this and they are using it, therefore then I must believe in exactly what these people say. Just because someone's using it, I'm now clearly tied to these people. And then that took on, then from there it went into Reddit, and then Reddit's just a freaking cesspool, right? And then Reddit, people like making threats like I'm a Nazi, like you name all the things that could be. I was labeled all those things. I was deserved to die. I was getting death threats in the I should die. Like real thing. So I should die for having a quote that talks about. I mean, it's really quite amazing that so many people would have such a visceral, would have such a visceral reaction to something like that. And I find it, one, if you read it and you're upset about it, you're the weak guy.
Yeah, you are.
I mean, you're the one going, hi, I'm the weak man you're talking about. That's why I'm so pissed off. Right? And that's what you're telling me.
Yep.
And then I'm like, so what is it about the weak man that really upsets you? Like, what is it that you feel in your heart? Like, why is it that this hard man creates good time? What does that mean to you? Like, I am genuinely curious. Like, what do they think a hard man is? Like, what is it that they're so upset about? I've never really got a real answer, except I'm just a Nazi. So that's the only answer I've ever gotten when I ask. You're just a Nazi. Oh, okay, thanks. I'm a Nazi. Thanks. Really, some deep intellectual diving on these people's part. But yeah, I got a lot of hate. I don't get as much now, but I got a lot of hate when that thing really became very, very popular. I think Donald Trump Jr. posted it somewhere, and that thing took off. Then it was on.
Well, when you're getting flack, that means you're flying over the target.
Yeah.
And my woman, who's a brilliant, beautiful woman, she and I were talking because, as you know, we had an election in Canada this week, and the Conservative Party lost to the Liberal Party. She and I were disappointed, upset, mildly depressed. And she said to me when I was speaking to her this morning, she said, "Hun, liberal people in politics tend to be conniving, underhanded, cunning, and all they're interested in is getting power. The conservative people in politics tend to be, more honorable, honest, and they want the right thing to happen for people." And this, she's never been a partisan person in her life. You know what I mean? This is just her observation of things in Canada, the US, and whatnot. And then she also said that I find that conservative people, and she doesn't even like those terms, conservative. She says the people who identify with the conservative side of things tend to be free thinkers. They think for themselves. They don't agree with everything their side agrees with. You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
they can admit when they're wrong. But the liberals, they are weak-minded. They can't engage in critical thinking very well, and they uncritically accept whatever their side is supposed to accept. They'll even change their opinion of 5 minutes ago if they hear that, oh, no, that's not the approved opinion anymore. When she said this to me, I automatically said, well, of course, I've known this for a long time. But everyone thinks of me as this conservative because I'm out there, hard on my sleeve about my politics and my opinions and my philosophies. But Teresa isn't. Teresa loves everybody, and everybody loves Teresa. For someone like her to come to this conclusion shows me that the left is so far gone that they've lost the non-political normal people who want to give them the benefit of the doubt, but no longer can. And I'm wondering what your comments are on that.
I think you've seen the way the left, the hard left, which we've talked about before, have gone to such extremes that on basic issues that are with the end of the states lately, there's this whole 80-20 issue. You know, when you look at 20%, 80% of the American people want this. And then there's someone defending MS-13 gangbangers. Like, what?
I think that's a 97-3 issue, brother, the MS-13 one. Yeah.
But you get the point of what I'm making. And so what you're doing, what's happening now is that the left has gone so far. Yeah. They are like losing people that never would have said anything. These are people looking at like, where's the common sense? And like, wait a minute, you're defending MS-13 gang. You're flying to El Salvador. Like, how does that help me as an American? How does it help me in the state of Maryland? Like, what? I don't understand. You're supposed to be my senator and you're flying down there to take care of a guy who beats his wife. Like, and I think that's when you're starting to see common sense people like your woman are like, what is happening? Like, this doesn't, what are you doing? Like, don't you know we have this issue? We have to confront with this. We should be dealing with this. We got all these things that you're worried about that. And I'm sure they have those same kind of things happening in Canada. They're like the left will cheerlead an issue. It's like, how does that even benefit anybody? It's like you're picking to work on an issue that has nothing to do with anything. That won't benefit a soul, yet they will champion it and go after it. I think too that I know, my wife too has not been overly political, but I know in the past, ever since Trump, came in on the scene, that she's become more and more political, more and more outspoken. It's because I think a lot of the left has become, they're actually anti-woman. Yeah. So when you look at like this almost like fourth wave of feminism, that's kind of what we're looking at now with the progressives. It's like they consider a man who calls himself a woman more of a woman than a biological woman now. That's kind of where the left is. That's literally how they sit. They will look at a trans woman as being more woman than a biological woman. And it's like, what? And so I think that's turned, when you look at just women in general who have been apolitical like ours, they're like, what is happening? Like, I'm a woman. No, you're just whatever. They come up with names for those women where they like, they have all those weird generic names like breastfeeder or whatever they are. You know what I'm saying? It's like
feeders, chest feeders,
chest feeders. It's like I'm a woman. And I think they've really offended to the point of no return for some of these women, and they've lost them. And then they started messing with their kids. When you look at the school here, you mess with their kids, man, it's on.
It's on. They'll rip you to shreds, man. They'll rip you to shreds.
And I'd be curious if it's happening in Canada. Like, we have a lot of our, like, the Muslim communities become more and more conservative because the Democrats in Michigan and Minnesota, these kind of northern states that border Canada have really gone against the family. And if you look at the Muslim community, it's, when you look at it outside of the religion, their value system is very conservative, right? They believe in the family structure. They have a deep, seated faith in a religion, right? They believe that what a man is. They know what a man is. They know what a woman is. They understand the roles of things, and that children where children should be. And I think they've lost. And it would interesting. You would look at, they would say conservatives are anti-Muslim or Islamic phobic, but you see a lot of Muslims coming the side over to the right and the conservative side because of what the left's doing. The left is anti-family.
It
And
is.
the core of the Muslim community are all families. They're families. They're trying to put their kids to school. They want the dream that they can get in Canada or they can get in the United States. And now they're confronted with, well, wait a minute, what you want to make my little girl a boy? What are you talking about? No, I just want them to get an education. That's it. And I think they're really losing a lot. I'm not. I'm disappointed in the election in Canada. I can understand what happened. I think the Trump influence was too much to overcome there. I think he overstepped on that in some regard.
He did,
I
but
I don't see how getting. I don't see how Carney is going. You're just going to get the same you've had for the last 9 years. I don't understand how, like, if you weren't happy with what you had, why did you just double down on it? Like,
well, here's what you want to understand. So, I saw an analysis by my friend Ezra Levant of Rebel News, and I was on his program making the case for Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives a few weeks ago. I'll send you that link because it's a very, very good interview he did with me. But he took a look at the polls that have been taken since early 2024, and that's when Trudeau was in charge of the Liberals, and the Liberals were tanking in the polls. The Conservative share of the vote in those polls has consistently been high 30s to mid 40s. So right around 40, 41, 42% of the vote. That's what they actually ended up getting. They got 42% of the vote. So Donald Trump opening his mouth did not cause an erosion of conservative support. Conservatives continued to support Pierre Poilievre at the same level. It had no effect on his level of support. What it did do was it spooked the progressives. And besides the Liberals, there are two other progressive parties. One of them is called the NDP, the New Democratic Party, and the other one's called the Green Party. And the NDP was polling at 17, 18%, the Greens at about 4 to 6%. The Greens and the NDP deliberately created their own support to have that lead off to the Liberals to stop the Conservatives when Trump got in. So it spooked the Liberals, who then did what they did. So I agree with you. Trump shouldn't have said what he said, because then the NDP and the Greens would have stayed where they are, and we would now be looking at a majority Conservative government. But the truth of the matter is, Canada is primarily a center-left nation. The United States is primarily a center-right nation. We won pretty close to our ceiling of conservative votes. In any other election in the last 40 years, that vote total for a conservative would mean a supermajority because of all these other parties taking the votes. But this became essentially a two-horse race, and we couldn't win that. For us to win a two-horse race, we need to find a way to get some of those progressives to become conservative voters. And we haven't, that's a problem for us to figure out and solve at the moment. I also believe that Pierre Poilievre did an excellent job. His campaign was brilliant. And the Conservatives ended up winning more than 20 seats, right? So they did well. The Liberals, though, also ended up winning another 8 or 9 seats. The NDP and the Bloc Québécois, those two parties, they just lost a ton of seats. And that's really, really why we are where we are. In my opinion, the Conservatives are in a good place. I don't think that Carney is intending to govern in a way that's going to help the people. That's why I think his minority government, because he has a minority government, not a majority government, is not going to last. And as a result of that, I think there'll be another election soon. Ezra Levant thinks it'll be in a year or so, and he believes Pierre Poilievre will win that election. And I think the NDP is going to have a new leader. This new leader is not going to try to tank the party. They're going to want to get their seats back. That'll be all she wrote. So there you have it. Donald Trump's influence was real. Donald Trump's influence was real, no question about it. And it was not positive. But Canada still, I think, will have an appetite for change, because the policies this man's going to put in place are going to piss off a lot of the people who ended up voting for him.
Yeah, I don't see it's going to change anything. It's not going to. It's like, seems like more of the same. Right.
Well, the government, yes, which I don't think is going to work for them, and I think that they're going to eventually face a confidence motion. And if they lose that confidence motion, then there'll be another election. And I think they're going to lose the confidence motion rather than win it sooner rather than later. So let's just end up seeing. But it is what it is. We move forward. As the late, great Ted Kennedy said, the hope lives on, the dream, and, the promise lives, and the dream will never die. And that's how we feel about Canada.
Yeah, Speaking of that, like how are the Canadians taking Trump's comments? He's very vocal.
Those comments are what spooked a bunch of them to wanting to vote for the Liberal Party. So that's how they're taking it.
Yeah.
There's a strain in Canada that loves the U.S. but has a love-hate relationship with it. And so when comments like 51st State come up, those people get pissed off and, they start voting emotionally and not logically. That happened to people I know, personal friends of mine. And one of them, I'm like, are you a fool? Are you an idiot? Why would you do this? And he's just defending his position to the point where I was not letting go. And he says, well, I'm not going to respond to you anymore. And I go, you do whatever you want, but I'm going to keep hammering you because you deserve to be hammered over this,
Well, that's the kind of interesting, when Bill Maher, the HBO political comment, you know who he is, Bill Maher.
Yeah, of course.
Went to the White House, he met with Trump, and he was like kind of blown away, kind of who Trump is, And I think the guy we see, he's just a showman. And I think all these comments, now, hear me out on this. Of the three kind of territorial comments he's made, actually four. He's made four. Made a comment about Canada, 51st State. He's made the comment about Greenland. He's made the comment about Panama Canal and the comment about Gaza. So my take on this, the comment to Canada he was just trolling. He's being a showman. He's being an asshole. He's trolling. He was trolling Trudeau. It worked. But as soon as Trudeau was gone, he should have just cooled his jets, but he didn't. He just keeps trolling. Because nowhere is that ever going to happen. Never going to happen. This is not going to happen. That's not going to happen. But I do have a question about something connected to that, and I'll come back to that because I'm just curious. You're as a Canadian. The Greenland comment. I think he's dead serious about that. I think he'd love to take Greenland as a U.S. territory.
And the Panama Canal, 100%.
Yeah. And the Panama, because I think the Chinese, what the Panamanians are doing there with it is absurd. Letting the Chinese essentially de facto control it is bullshit. And no one in the free world should want the Chinese controlling the Panama Canal. Let's just say that. Done. Whatever. Yeah. We should want the United States in control of that. Done. Period. I think that's fine. Then Gaza. I think the comment in Gaza was strictly to get other nations in the Middle East to move and to try to say, well, we don't want the United States sitting here. We don't want that. So what are we going to do? And you saw movement. We saw things happening from him making that comment. We saw other nations start in the Middle East start to make movement to like, well, hold on. Why don't we go in there? Why don't we invest in it? Why don't we rebuild it and all that? So I think not everything he does. I think some things he's genuine about. Others he's just trolling, and others he's playing some kind of a game to get people to move to action. But I do have a question. Like when you look at the provinces, what are the stipulations legally there for a province to secede from Canada?
I don't know, to be honest with you. That's an interesting question.
What if Alberta goes, listen, what's happening in Ottawa is not aligned with how we believe. We have a lot of natural resources. We could be a very strong nation based on our, oil and gas.
There's a lot of talk about that. There's a lot of talk about that right now. The Premier of Alberta has passed a law in Alberta that seems to give her the option to start a process around that. The federal government has always said you can't leave once you're here, but the provincial governments have said, hey, we're going to have a referendum, and if the people vote for it, we're going to do it. Quebec twice vote on whether or not.
I remember those.
And both of those failed, but barely. One of them, the second one, barely failed. There hasn't been another attempt at that since. But that's really what it's about.
Yeah, I would just be curious. I
don't have an answer for you, and I don't think constitutionally there is a good answer that yes, there's a way to do it. The people on the Federalist side would say there absolutely isn't. But the people in Alberta right now, there's 30% support for secession in Alberta. 30%.
And think about what would the Canadian government do? Like if the Albertans say we're out, are they going to go and arrest them? Like, what are they going to do? Send the military to stop Alberta from becoming an independent republic? I mean, I'd be curious. It's an interesting thought exercise to kind of go down. Like, what exactly is Ottawa like prepared to do?
If Alberta decides to secede, I suspect they'll do nothing. They'll hem and haw, and they won't do it. But I could be wrong. They could send the military in. Who knows?
I mean, what were they prepared to do about Quebec? Were they going to let Quebec go, or was how would I know all the talk back then? What was the answer from Ottawa, from federal government? Were they going to allow it? Like, were they going to honor the will of the people?
They didn't say anything. They didn't say anything. The referendum happened and it failed, so they buried it. Like I said, can Alberta do this? Sure. Will Alberta do this? Not sure. I think the threat of it will be enough to bring the Canadian government to the table, and the threat of it is.
I think that's how Canadians deal with the Liberal government. That's there. I think you create a block that says we're not. Nope. You either do what we want or we're out. I think that it's coming to a point of look at the resources. If those block of provinces just said we're out.
If Alberta and Saskatchewan leave Canada, there's no reason for Canada to exist. So I'm telling you that flat out.
Look at all those natural resources are gone.
Dude,
and I know that probably Alberta, I'm sure
Canada's government, and we're getting near the end of our time together today. So this will probably need to be on another conversation. But the Canadian government has something called equalization payment, where they basically tax the richer provinces and give that money to the poorer ones. So Alberta has been paying that money to Quebec and the eastern provinces for decades, and they're sick of it.
Really?
Oh, yeah, they're sick of it. And this is one of the things, it's bullshit, but it's being done. It's one of the things that the Premier of Alberta, Danielle Smith, is putting on the table and saying, we're not putting up with this anymore. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. My own thinking is that the threat of secession will be enough to force the federal government to negotiate. And if it chooses not to negotiate, that threat will be more than just a threat. It'll be something that will actually happen.
And then what did they do? And then what? I can't let you go real quick. And then what did they do? Did they align themselves with the United States, or did they become independent republics?
It's a good. I
think it's a fascinating topic, by the way. I think it's fascinating.
And I think you and I, and you and I will discuss it as we discussed next week when we have that other call we're going to have for that other reason. But the truth of the matter is, that, in my opinion, it's not going to get to that. That's my personal opinion. But if it does get to that, I think it'll happen quickly. If the Canadian government chooses not to negotiate in good faith with Alberta and some of the other Western provinces, they will very quickly mobilize to leave. But in my opinion, they're going to cave, because the Premier of Alberta, she's a tough cookie. She's Canada's Iron Lady, right?
Oh, no, I've seen her. She's impressive. She's impressive.
She's the tough cookie. And Mark Carney is a pussy. He's a pussy. He's a pussy. So we got tough lady versus the pussy. What you want to do? All right, brother, as always, a pleasure to have you on the show. God bless you. And look forward to the next time we have this conversation.
All right, brother. Thank you again for the opportunity. Be well.
Yeah, man. You bet. And folks, Geoff, under his professional name, G. Michael Hopf, has written over 40 novels. They've sold millions of copies. He is a international #1 best-selling author. All of his books are great. His latest one, The Cries of a Dying World, is particularly good. And his very first one that I read, it's called The End, is one of the best books of a dystopian future that I've ever come across or read in my life. And I highly recommend that you pick up those two books as a start.
Thank you. Yes. And they can get them on Amazon. Thanks a lot.
Amazon. We'll make sure we put those links in the show notes. Cheers, mate.
Thanks, Nikki.
Thank you for listening to the Sovereign Man Podcast. If you're ready to take charge of your life and become the man you've always wanted to be, we invite you to join the movement at sovereignman.ca.